Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The new mini-series Obi-Wan Kenobi is set roughly 9 years before the Battle of Yavin and 10 years after Order 66 and the fall of the Republic and the Jedi Order. Today we'll be taking a look at the state of the galaxy during this time period. We'll look at three major factions, the Empire, Rebel Alliance, and also the various criminal syndicates that rule the Outer Rim. By 10 BBY, there wasn't really much of a rebel alliance at all. There wasn't even an alliance to restore the Republic, really. Senator Mon Mothma was still trying to fight the system from within the Imperial Senate. Princess Leia in 10 BBY was 9 years old at the time and had run away from the royal palace for the first time and hid out in the woods of Alderaan. She recalled this as being one of the best weeks of her entire life. A lot of future rebellion leaders at this point in time are probably still preteens and kids, or in the beginning of their adult life, like Han Solo, who was dodging mortars in the trenches of Mimban in 10 BBY. He would also meet Chewbacca for the first time on this muddy world. The only real resistance against the Empire during this time period was small, scattered groups that were fighting in one sector, one planet, or one region. There was no unified, galactic-wide movement against the Empire just yet. You had organizations like the Free Ryloth movement, headed by Clone Wars veteran and guerrilla hero Cham Syndulla. 4 years before the events of the KENOBI series, the Twi'leks had actually spent the majority of their resources trying to take down Emperor Palpatine's Star Destroyer when he came into their system, and the Twi'leks almost succeeded in murdering him, along with Darth Vader. It was like the closest assassination attempt ever, so these guys are serious. The life of a revolutionary leader is quite like that of an NFL head coach. Your family will ultimately suffer because of your profession and how many endless hours you put into defeating your enemies. Before we continue, a word from our sponsor for today's video, Babbel. Babbel is a language learning app that doesn't just teach you vocabulary, but helps you engage in real-world practical conversations in another language. And this isn't like your old high school Spanish or French class. Each one of these lessons are broken down into short 10-minute interactive modules. You also get to choose what you learn and how you learn. Do you like doing things with other peers, or are you more into educational games that you can play by yourself?
Witamy w Polsce.
Witamy w Polsce.
Nie, dziękuję.
Nie, dziękuję. Babbel says within 3 weeks they'll have you speaking a new language. And you know what they say, when you learn a new language, you can also think in that language, and that'll just bring you a step closer to learning a lot about a new culture. And better yet, if you use our link in the description below, you can get 65% off a subscription to Babbel. If you're not satisfied, they have a 20-day money-back guarantee. Thank you for your patience. Back to the rest of the episode. Cham Syndulla eventually had to decide what to put first, his own family or the movement. Eventually, in 12 BBY, his daughter Hera Syndulla would get fed up from all of this neglect, and she would leave Ryloth and try to fight the Empire on her own terms. Meanwhile, in the Lothal sector, Ephraim and Mira Bridger have been actively resisting the Empire by broadcasting a pirate program that criticized Imperial rule. By 10 BBY, Ephraim and Mira Bridger are arrested by the Empire for spreading propaganda. They're accused of treason, and unfortunately they would die later on during a prison riot. They would leave behind Ezra Bridger, who was just a baby. He basically had to figure out how to live on the streets of Lothal all by himself. Other groups like Enfys Nest would emerge. They would grow as a reaction to the chaos allowed by Imperial rule and operate as bandits, stealing from Imperial convoys in order to take care of their own. You also had the partisan faction led by Saw Gerrera. This was a movement that originated on Alderaan during the Clone Wars. They were opposed to the separatist puppet government. After the war ended, these partisans continued fighting when their Republic allies turned into Imperial occupiers. As the Empire began cracking down more on Saw and his movement, they would leave Alderaan and continue the fight on other planets against the Empire. The partisans waged a non-stop asymmetric war against the Empire on many different worlds, but because they didn't have any connection to these planets, their tactics became a lot more ruthless and they caused a lot more collateral damage. It's because of this that most other rebel factions started distancing themselves away from what the Empire rightly called a terrorist organization. By 17 BBY, the partisans were delivering arms to resistance fighters in the salient system. In 14 BBY, the partisans were hitting the Imperial garrison on Kashyyyk. In 13 BBY, Jyn Erso, the daughter of Galen Erso, was put into the care of Saw Gerrera. He would train her to become a very proficient fighter. Now, none of these rebel factions really made much leeway against the Empire, and that's because they were separated from one another. But still, this was a very important time for the rebellion. Many future rebel heroes were learning the basics of sticking it to the Empire during this time period, and the Empire also hadn't completely militarized by this point in time. In the first few years of the collapse of the Republic and rise of the New Order, things changed only aesthetically. The Coruscant sector was renamed the Imperial Sector, the Galactic City was renamed the Imperial City. The clones received new armor and were now called Stormtroopers. The Venator-class Star Destroyer removed its red stripe and was still playing an integral part in rounding up and destroying the remaining pockets of Separatist holdouts. Even the Senate was still intact and still allowed to hold some ceremonial powers. Emperor Palpatine would gradually erode the remaining Republic institutions that guarded the galaxy from authoritarianism, and in doing so, he would sow the seeds of dissent that would eventually grow into the Rebel Alliance. Palpatine's Commission for the Preservation of the New Order, or Compnor, emerged as an extremely powerful political entity within the Empire. It was sort of like Emperor Palpatine's Nazi Party. Not all Imperial soldiers and officers were a part of Compnor, but membership definitely didn't hurt. And as usual with these type of authoritarian dictatorships, you had powerful individuals both from the political sphere, from the military, and business industry vying for Palpatine's attention and ultimately blessings. One of Palpatine's favorites was Wilhelm Tarkin. Tarkin had first met the Emperor during the Republic era. Tarkin was a young officer with the Outland Region security forces at the time, and Palpatine was the young senator from Naboo. The two would continue building their relationship throughout the Clone Wars. By the time the Empire had fully risen, Wilhelm Tarkin had become one of Palpatine's main advisors for military-related projects. He would develop the Tarkin Doctrine, which dramatically changed the military doctrine of the Empire. There would be more focus on the appearance of the military and how fearsome it was, rather than how functional it actually was. The idea was to suppress dissent through an awesome show of force. Eventually, Wilhelm Tarkin would start the Tarkin Initiative as well, a secret think tank within the Imperial Military Department of Advanced Weapons Research. This organization would be responsible for many secret weapons projects like the Death Star. Director Orson Callan Krennic would be appointed as the leader of this program and would begin developing several super weapons, including the laser found on the Death Star. The key to Orson Krennic's program was crystallographer Galen Erso. He alone could unlock the secrets of the Kyber crystal, which could amplify powers to terrifying levels. Now, once Galen Erso realized that the Empire was trying to weaponize his research, he would flee. But a few years later, in 13 BBY, he would be found on the planet of Lamu and brought back into the program. Around this time, Galen Erso was forced to begin the fusing of several smaller Kyber crystals to make the larger Kyber crystals used in the reactor chamber of the Death Star. Galen Erso also began fomenting the plan to leak the Death Star's main weakness to the Alliance to restore the Republic. Meanwhile, over Geonosis, the Empire was using Wookiee slaves and Geonosian drones to complete the construction of the massive Death Star Station superstructure. Equally as impressive was the secretive supply chain established by the Empire that carefully whisked away supplies to this very, very clandestine operation. Also, in 12 BBY, Darth Vader's new castle on Mustafar was finally complete. It was designed by Darth Moomin, an ancient Sith whose spirit existed in a mask. This fortress would become Darth Vader's sanctuary in the coming battle against the Rebel Alliance. On the criminal front, Han Solo does the Guzzle Run in 12 parsecs in 10 BBY, and Kira replaces Dryden Voss as the head of the Crimson Dawn and takes on a much more populist ideology. After Maul dies, Kira would basically take over the Crimson Dawn and launch all of its resources against the Empire. Meanwhile, on Tatooine, the Great Water Drought has made life almost unbearable on the planet. Jabba the Hutt worsens the situation by sending out his henchmen to collect water taxes from the moisture farmers. It is during this time that Luke Skywalker accidentally runs into a bunch of Jabba's thugs, but is saved just in time by Obi-Wan Kenobi, the constant guardian of Luke. Jabba the Hutt would later send the bounty hunter Black Chrysanthemum to the Lars homestead to figure out what happened to his water tax collectors. Once again, Obi-Wan saves the day and sends the Wookiee running. Which means that Jabba the Hutt now knows that the Lars homestead is definitely a trouble spot, and every individual he sent there has basically disappeared or come back empty-handed and very confused. The Pike Syndicate, as usual, continues to lie low and focus mainly on increasing its holdings in the spice industry. A minor slave revolt on Kessel did affect their bottom line, but I'm sure it'll straighten things out. So there you have it, guys. That is what's happening in the rest of the galaxy during the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I, for one, really hope that Kenobi will ride some speeders, maybe the long way around Tatooine, because, you know, if we're going to see the planet, might as well see the whole thing. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.